Good morning. It is Friday, July 3rd, 2020. This is at least the day of the week that we're celebrating the 4th of July, even though the 4th of July is actually tomorrow and Saturday. A lot of people are off work today or off work at home, just not working from home. And we think about the 4th of July, it brings up typically a lot of thoughts about independence. You know, this was a declaration of independence from England. We think a lot about the idea of freedom, and it's a good reminder of freedom. And with all that's going on in the world right now, especially in this country, I think it's important to take stock and take a look at what freedom is, what it isn't, what freedoms you have or don't, and how our freedoms are actually different and have been for a long time. And maybe we need to think more about unequal freedoms versus so-called equal freedoms. But I want you to think today about history. I just want to plant a seed around history. See, I hated history in school. I hated it in elementary school and high school. I took as little as possible in college, but here's the interesting part. If I went back to college today, I think I'd be a history major because I'm fascinated by it. Because when I was younger, they tried to teach me history based upon just dates and information. And what I've learned is that history is so much about the context and the people's lives and their interactions and the relationships and the pushes and the pulls and all these things were in play at different times in history, whether it's in the U.S. history or world history. But I particularly want us to think about U.S. history and also to think about, most of us, frankly, don't know our history. And I'm one that still says there's so much I don't know. But I've been following history. I've been reading so much history over the last, say, 20 years that I certainly know a lot more than I used to. And what I have learned is that a lot of what we think is history isn't actually true. We, in various ways and for various reasons, were given a certain version of history. So here's the question I want to ask you. I've been asking this question of a lot of people recently, and I will tell you, I've probably asked at least 30 people, and only one of those 30 got the answer right. And I'll tell you ahead of time, it's a little bit of a trick question, but the trick in it is what I think we can learn from. So the question is, when did women get the right to vote in the United States? When did women get the right to vote in the United States? Now, a lot of people hear that and say, oh, I don't know. Seems like it was a long time ago. Maybe it was the late 1800s, early 1900s. I'm not really sure, man. I should know that. So some people just don't have any idea. A large group of people, not, pretty good number of people have said, I think it was in the early 1900s, like 1920 or something like that. Really close, except really wrong. Because actually that legislation was passed in 1919. It was actually introduced in the late 1800s, and it took over 20 years to actually pass. But here's the tricky part. In 1919, white women got the right to vote. Only. The rest of the women in the United States of America did not get the federal right to vote until the 1960s of the civil rights legislation. Did you know that? My guess is most of you didn't. I didn't know that until a couple of months ago. I was reading something and I read about it and I said, what? So I realized, was I taught misinformation? Or maybe it didn't matter because in the context of my education, most of it was about being white. Now, you may have decided to stop listening already, and that's okay. But here's my challenge to you. It's time to take a look at history so we really understand history. There's that old saying that if we forget history, we're doomed to repeat it. And most of us don't like history, and we think it's in the past. But history informs our today. History shows us what has been so that we can assess it against what we think is today and what might actually be today. So that's my strong invitation. My hope is that we'll start taking a look at history differently. Instead of seeing it as facts and figures and old information just intended to be remembered, use it to better understand. Just use history to better understand, and to maybe just for a moment to say, huh, I never thought about that. Huh, I didn't know that. Huh, how might I see things differently if I actually understand the truth of history? So that's my thought for the day, history. I think it's important. I'm still digging into that history, seeking to understand what was, what is, and what can be. So have a great weekend. Enjoy the holiday weekend. Keep taking care of yourself and everyone that you care about, and certainly stay connected. And I will be back with you on Monday.